Good afternoon, everybody. The May 18, 2010 Special Joint City Council Redevelopment Agency meeting is called to order. This meeting has been properly noticed and posted in compliance with the open meeting law. These proceedings are being presented live on KCLV Cable Channel 2 and are closed captioned for our hearing impaired viewers. The special meeting, as well as all other KCLV programming, can be viewed on the internet at www.lasvegasnevada.gov. The proceedings will be rebroadcast Thursday at 12 p.m., on Friday at 6 p.m., Saturday at 5 a.m., Sunday at 3 p.m., and the following Monday at 6 a.m. The building is protected by a state-of-the-art fire detection and suppression sprinkler system, so should alarms activate, please leave through the exits, and our marshals will tell you when it's safe to re-enter. There's no reason to believe that that would happen. Before we proceed with the agenda, would everyone please rise for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Guys, well? Items number 4 and 5. Item number 4 is a resolution R312010, discussion and possible action to adopt by resolution the budget policies upon which the city budgets are based. And number 5 is RA72010, discussion and possible action to adopt by resolution the budget policy upon which the City of Las Vegas Redevelopment Agency's budgets are based. Mr. Vincent.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mark Vincent, Chief Financial Officer. I asked you to call these two items together because these, the budget policies attached to both the RDA and the city are identical. Typically, in the past, we've just approved these at the budget hearing, but we decided this year to make them in the form of a resolution so that they would stand indefinitely until we amended them at a future date. I will tell you that our Citizens Priority Advisory Council, the members that you appointed to that, have reviewed these and approved them as well. And there is really only one change on both of those policies for the RDA and for the city, and that is on the budget policy document itself. It would be on Roman numeral 5F, and that states that the ending cash balances for internal service funds should equal 10% of the prior year's expenditures for operations, 25% for capital acquisition funds, and 25% for employee benefit fund expenditures. That is the policy that you actually approved. Also, we discussed it at the March 10th workshop, and it's the policy that we use to determine how much in available funding we had in the Internal Service Fund to help us with our budget shortfall. So staff would recommend that we would approve that resolution.
All right, and as to 5, the same?
And it's identical for the RDA as well.
Very good.
The resolution indicates for the RDA that that what it says the City of Las Vegas on the attachment is deemed to refer to the agency.
All right, thank you very much. And are there any questions of Mr. Vincent? All right, hearing none, Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Would you just say that the first part, just so our audience that will be watching understands well, would you just repeat?
What that
It was
change
very short, yes.
What the change was? We have instituted a policy that says for the internal service funds, and an internal service fund is any fund that we use as a vehicle for allocating costs to internal city departments for the use of vehicles, telephones, computers, occupying space to pay for utilities and custodial services and the like. We never had a policy in the past, and so now we've instituted a policy that says the fund balances, the cash balances in those internal service funds cannot exceed 10% of the prior year expenditures, with the exception of the employee benefit fund and any fund that has a capital replacement for capital recovery, like vehicles have to be replaced periodically. Those thresholds would be 25%. When we applied those thresholds to our budget, we identified just under $21 million in cash balances we had in internal service funds that would be available for reprogramming to help us with our budget deficit.
Thank you.
So that's what we've done.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Please.
Make motion to accept.
I'm sorry.
Make motion to call special meeting to approve this item.
All right, that's on item 4. Let's vote on that, please. Opposed? Motion carries. And 5, please.
Same motion, Your Honor.
All right, let's vote, please. post. Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 6 is a public hearing and possible action regarding fiscal year 2011 City of Las Vegas tentative budget and fiscal year 2011 City of Las Vegas final budget, including the 5-year capital improvement plan. And I believe I should also read number 7 at the same time, a public hearing and possible action regarding fiscal year 2011 City of Las Vegas Redevelopment Agency tentative budget and final fiscal year 2011 City of Las Vegas Redevelopment Agency final budget. These are both public hearings, which I now declare open. Before we hear from Ms. Fretwell and Mr. Vincent, I'd like to make a prefatory remark, which I think will set the stage for a very difficult budget hearing. Difficult is not the right word. The last several months have been brutal around here. Brutal for our loyal staff, brutal for the electeds, and brutal for the City of Las Vegas. We began to confront these issues years ago when we recognized that our revenues would come to a point where they're not meeting our expenses. Nobody in this room predicted or could have predicted what happened with the economy, and which forced us to address these issues a lot sooner than we believed we would have had to. We have in the past, however, since last November, taken action which is heartbreaking in the sense that loyal employees who have done nothing wrong whatsoever to deserve to be terminated had to suffer a consequence at a time when jobs are at a premium and unemployment is a high through no fault of their own, but because we were unable to do what we as electeds have as a sworn duty to make sure that we have a balanced budget. And as a result of that, back in November, we cut $8.6 million off of our budget. In March of this year, we cut $26.5 million off of our budget for a total of $35.1 million off our budget. But in that process, we had to let go, and this does not include vacancies which were not filled. We had to let go 145 of our finest, of our best, the people who serve the citizens of Las Vegas. Now today, should we approve this budget, we are going to cut another $16.8 million from our budget, and as a consequence of that, 60 more people, 60 more loyal employees will be terminated. As a council, we had made a decision that we believed would have been able to avert this severe decree. And that was, we told the employees that the only way we could not have these dire consequences was if they came together and agreed to having their salaries remain flat, which meant no COLAs, no steps, no longevity, no merit, plus an 8% reduction of their salary and or benefits. And to this moment, we have not received any type of positive response that those terms would be agreed upon. Therefore, leaving us no alternative, notwithstanding Jeremy Aguero's presentation at the council meeting, where he said the last thing in the world is to create more unemployment, to create more people out of work. But unfortunately, that's the only solution. That can happen as a consequence of being placed in this position. I'm hopeful that this will be a wake-up call, that if in fact the council approves the budget as is recommended by our staff, that the city employees will come forward and they'll say, we realize what just happened, and we don't want to see our fellows lose their jobs, that we're willing to make this sacrifice and go flat and take an 8% reduction of salary and or benefits in order to save those jobs. Unless we have that, then what will happen is what will happen. And none of us at this point in time feel good about it. As a result of what's going to take place today, we're going to have a new city. And it's not going to be as good as the old city. We're going to have a new city that won't be able to provide the services that our constituents have come to enjoy. They won't be able to have the kind of comforts that the city has been able to provide in the past. But once again, we don't have a choice because we have to balance the budget. So with that, we're going to listen to our staff. They're going to make a presentation. The council will have the opportunity to make whatever comments or ask whatever questions that they may have. But if anybody thinks that this has been easy on any of us, they're sorely mistaken, because we're taking our responsibilities very seriously here, and we're once again asking for people to step up so that this won't be the kind of consequence that is about to take place. With that, Ms. Fretwell.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. As I was preparing for today, I thought back to this very time last year, 12 months ago, when you were approving the fiscal year 10 budget. And at that time, I indicated that we were going to have a $31 million deficit budget, but that we'd be taking the better part of the year to make significant cuts for fiscal year 11, and that we would need to identify at least $30 million worth of cuts to balance our budget in fiscal year 11, and that we would work with our unions and our employees to address that shortfall, that we would be implementing massive changes to the way we do business, and that we would engage the public in our deliberations as we made those recommendations for your final approval. I think we've done all of those things, but what I didn't know then that I know now is that we lost another $21 million this year that we weren't anticipating. So that $31 million deficit budget popped up to a $52 million deficit budget. Our 5-year shortfall more than doubled in a span of about 6 months, all because our revenues continued to significantly underperform. With today's action, we will have cut over $50 million, as you mentioned, Mayor, with tragic consequences. We will be saying goodbye to over 200 of our valued employees. We've cut over $100 million since this downturn started out of our budget. We've cut our budget by a sixth. We're back to 2004, 2005 funding levels. That's no easy task. And we didn't go into this lightheartedly or take it any less seriously. This is dramatic and it's serious. There is a bright spot I do want to mention. Through our efforts, through making these very difficult recommendations for your consideration today, we will have cut our 5-year shortfall in half. I don't take that lightly, but it tells you the magnitude of the kinds of cuts we have to make to eliminate a structural deficit of the size we've been facing. Today we'll present a budget representing a whole host of very hard decisions that has significant community and organizational impacts. It is a balanced budget that relies on significant reductions in our expenses and drawing down on our reserves. It's a $477 million general fund budget. I know the development of this budget has taken a huge toll on all of those involved in developing it. Jim, Orlando, Scott, and Brian Knudsen out of the manager's office. Mark, Candace, their budget team, Vanetta, who've been working countless hours. Claudette, Judy, and Dan and their HR team to try and manage the impacts of these layoffs, and doing that with great empathy. And each and every one of the directors that are here behind me and their teams. And maybe most critically, our employees and our community. So I don't bring this budget to you lightly, and I just want to remind you of that. We all know what's at stake today. As a leadership team, I feel like, as our mayor and council, you're second to none. You've been willing to take a leadership role that aggressively addresses our financial situation. You believed in our 3 goals of maintaining fiscal integrity, sustaining our critical services, and preserving jobs. And although it doesn't feel like we've done much of that today, we've done a tremendous amount to do all 3 of those things. I thank you for your continued support and your willingness to work with your management team to resolve this shortfall. Mark and I are going to quickly go through this budget presentation. All of you have seen it in briefings. This will be the first time the public's seen the $16 million cuts in a PowerPoint presentation, although we've been running information on Channel 2. We put ads in the paper and have bolstered up our website to ensure people have the information that they need about the impacts. And before we start, I respectfully ask for your support for one of the toughest budgets that I hope to ever have to compile as a city manager. So what we're going to do very quickly is tell you what we've done since March 10th. We'll go over the Fiscal Oversight Committee changes. That's the group that's assembled to advise Mark and I on our revenue projections. We will lay out the fiscal year 11 budget reduction options by department so that it's very clear what the impacts are. We will have a final budget overview, and then I'd like to wrap up with where we go from here. On March 10th, you approved a budget that had a total reduction of over 190 positions. We restructured the internal service funds. We had reductions in public safety vacancies. We had reductions in marshals and corrections. We eliminated our Evolve program, and we reduced targeted services in neighborhood services. We closed 8 community schools. We preserved Safe Key track break and summer camps by implementing some additional cost recovery fees. We merged 2 additional divisions, our cultural divisions that were in 2 different departments. We are implementing a partial closure of Reed Whipple Cultural Center, and we have additional reductions in the Building and Safety Department. Despite working to develop this budget, we have continued to try and keep the lines of communication open with our labor groups. We have 4 of them. You see them here on the screen. As the mayor indicated, we have received proposals from a couple of our units. We've been in active discussions with 3 of them. The fruits of those efforts haven't borne out completely yet. And so the budget before you really doesn't assume concessions with the exception of the fire department because we're in active negotiations with that. And Mark will go into that in greater detail. But the bottom line is the goals that we were hoping on the labor negotiations line just haven't been accomplished yet. I never close a door to that kind of dialogue. I am certainly hopeful that despite this difficult budget, that there will still be opportunity for continued dialogue. We're going to need it. Looking at fiscal year 12, we still have a $47 million shortfall. So think about how hard this year has been. Next year's a repeat. Just to put it into context. And I don't want to be the doom and gloom city manager, but I am charged with being responsible financially as a fiduciary of this organization, as are each of you. And we have to do everything we have to do to balance the budget. I'm hopeful that we will make progress in this area, but we're doing what we need to do as far as balancing the budget in light of where we are currently in these discussions. I'll turn it over to Mark now, and he's going to go through the financial projections as well as the changes to the departmental budget since the March 10th workshop.
Thank you, Betsy. Again, for the record, Mark Vincent. This slide I wanted to share with you again. You've seen it before, and it illustrates what Ms. Fretwell said earlier, and that is, as you know, we have a 6-month review with our Financial Oversight Committee. Back in November when we reviewed them, that's when we realized our shortfall had ballooned to $60 million, and we had talked about making half of that in program cuts and half of that in reserves. In May of this, earlier this month, I should say, actually in April, I've lost track of time. I'm in a time warp. The committee met in May, and we identified some areas where we had to make some adjustments to our revenue forecast. And the area that I've highlighted in yellow illustrates that. The top data line shows what the latest update was from the Financial Oversight Committee, and the bottom represents the change from last November to May. And when you look at the loss of revenue of $6 million in 10, which is our current budget year, which affects our fund balance reserves, as well as fiscal year 11, which is the budget year we're talking about, that's the $21 million that Betsy is referring to. And then if you slide over the fiscal year 12, that's where you can see that we still have a significant issue in fiscal year 12. So that's the $20 million. This is why we're proposing to you that we need to make some additional budget cuts on top of the $35 million that you've already approved. So what will those cuts look like? And this slide, and hopefully it's a little more readable than what you've seen in the past. The second numerical column says final fiscal year 11. Those are the cuts that we're proposing to you today. Everything in the prior cuts, you've already given us approval to go forward. You gave us approval in March for the $26 million. You gave us approval back in November for the $8.6, and there's some prior cuts that we had done in fiscal years 8 and 9, which were primarily program cuts, but had more to do with vacant positions and other non-labor items. And some of the things I just wanted to point out to you here is as we look at this additional 16.8, it's going to bring us to a budget of about $477.1 million in total, but it represents cuts cumulatively of over 17% in cost. And you can see that with the exception perhaps of our Metro, our fire, and our D&E budgets, almost everybody has seen a significant budget reduction in anywhere from 25 to 35% and more. When we take those departments and categorize them into the functional service areas as we're required to do in our budget filing, you can begin to see that, again, public safety is a high priority for us, but it has not been exempt from cuts. We've been, as you know, from March, we were successfully able to have a budget reduction for the funding of Metro, and we've also had some reductions here with our own fire and D&E. But you can see that most of the non-public safety departments, with the exception of the judicial area, have seen cuts that are just about 30% or higher. When we look at the staffing levels, again, these are full-time equivalents, not necessarily people that got separated from the jobs, but they do represent positions that are no longer funded. Some of those positions may have been vacant. In fact, a majority of the 519 positions that we dealt with in fiscal year 09 were vacant. But you can see here that a couple of departments I'll point out to you, planning and development and building and safety, over 40% cuts in staffing since 2008. Huge, huge cuts. Now we can argue that the work is not there, but the fact the work isn't there is indicative of the kind of economy we're in, too. There is no new construction, there's no new development, and obviously we are in a deep recession. Point out to you that between fire and rescue and detention and enforcement, you can see the staffing cuts there that are much less than some of the staffing cuts you've seen for some of the other departments. What I'd like to do now is to walk you through some of the slides that we presented to you. This is a similar format that you saw on the March 10th budget workshop. These are the same sets of slides that we briefed you with in our budget briefings. And there's a couple of changes, and you can see the first one here is fire and rescue is a change. I'm going to go through these relatively quickly, but if you have questions, feel free to stop and ask me, and we'll do our best to answer them. What you saw in the budget briefing was a $4.6 million roughly reduction in the fire and rescue budget. It didn't represent any staff reductions, but it was a direct reduction in overtimes through a technique of browning out specific stations or specific apparatus, specific equipment, an engine, a fire truck, a rescue unit, for example. And that was, I think, an average of about 3 units per day on average. We have since revisited that, and I want to explain why we're doing that. One of our issues is we currently have an open contract with the IAFF, and we are very, very hopeful that we will have some positive resolution either through the negotiation process or if need be, obviously in the final arbitration process. We're very hopeful that we'll get some concessions from that, and we believe it's appropriate and adequate for us to budget for what we think we may get in concessions. And again, this is necessary for us to deal with this additional $21 million in revenue loss that we're faced for fiscal year 10 and 11. So what this change represents, again, no particular staff reductions, although there is a couple of vacant positions that will be affected, but there's no elimination of personnel, fire personnel. And what we're doing here is we're recognizing some savings we expect to get or hopeful to get from our negotiations, as well as the 3 average brownouts per day. I will tell you, just to put it on the record, to the extent that we are not successful at achieving the potential concession savings that we're hopeful that we can achieve, we'll have to come back and likely revisit this. That would, the only recourse that we would have in this case would be to increase the number of brownouts, and that's something that we're not comfortable doing without bringing it back to you all and having a discussion about what that might be. But for now, for this budget, we're optimists that we're going to get some form of a amicable resolution to our contract, as well as I say, the 3 average brownouts. Now, the brownouts, the fire chief is here and can address that issue, but you've heard him speak to this issue back in March at our budget hearing. They'll be on a rotational basis. They will not have any impact to our first response. We'll still, on the EMS side, we'll still be able to maintain our 5 to 6 minute response time. So that won't be the issue. He has indicated on the record before that he didn't think that would have an adverse effect on our ability to respond for emergency medical. But again, he's in the audience if you care to ask him any questions regarding that.
I think what we'll do is we'll continue with your report, and then at the conclusion, if any of the council members want to hear from Chief Gavin, we'll invite him up.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, could I just ask, did I hear correctly, in this budget, we have budgeted with 3 brownouts?
Yes.
Nothing else for this year's budget? If anything else increased, it would come back to the board?
Yes, that's the
That's
plan.
exactly right.
So we're talking 3 brownouts?
We're talking 3 brownouts, and we're hoping for successful negotiations or arbitration to meet the budget target. If we're unsuccessful or do not hit that threshold, we would bring it back to the mayor and council for consideration
Okay.
before we exceed 3 brownouts.
Okay. It might come back for that, but we would not do anything more than 3 unless it came back to the council.
That's correct.
With respect to detention and enforcement, we had been looking at the potential for taking out a jail unit, about a 200-bed unit, as a cost savings measure, as well as making some reductions in our marshal services. As a result of discussions that we've had with the sheriff, discussions that included the city attorney's office, as well as our chief, Karen Coyne, we decided that that probably is not an avenue we want to pursue. It has some consequences in how we manage our inmates and control our inmates that we don't really want to have to deal with. And so in working through that, we've decided that it would be a better approach to make some minimal cuts in the area of detention in terms of licensed law enforcement technicians and things of that nature, but we're not going to eliminate the 200-bed unit. That's going to cause us to have to add back to the D&E budget about $1.3 million. The elimination, I should have said that the elimination of the 200-bed jail unit is about $2.1 million savings. By adding it back, what we're looking at is, as a partial offset to that, is begin to look towards different deployment of our marshals for our park service, that would look towards a mid-year reduction of approximately another 12 marshals, 1 sergeant, and 11 marshals mid-year. That's a 6-month period of time that allows us to work with the sheriff, who is also in the audience and can address any concerns you might have with Metro Service, but allows us to work with him and to work with Chief Coyne on developing a process and a coverage, if you will, for our parks to make sure that the citizens that are using our parks are have the same safety level as they have today. So what this contemplates is that we would put back the 200-bed jail, that we would begin the process of reducing another wave of marshals. Now, in the March 10th, we've already identified, I think it was 12 marshals, 10 marshals in March. This would add another 12 that we would process in mid-fiscal year, probably around January. It also gives us time to work out the issues that we're still pursuing with the warrant service program, where we may have a possibility, an opportunity to transfer about 8 of those marshals to help us with the swing shift warrant program. And as you know, we're still working with the courts to try to figure that process out. So to the extent that we have a little time before we implement that additional, that second wave, it'll allow us to also make sure that we've vetted out entirely the warrant service program as well. So what the impacts we see here, we're still looking at a closure of the Northwest substation. By the way, the 20 positions, I believe 12 of those will be mid-year reductions. The other 8 would be July 6th reductions. By the way, I don't know that I mentioned that this wave of the $16.8 million reductions, these employees that would be affected would be scheduled to separate no later than July 16th, as opposed to I think it's the June 12th we have from the current process.
Mark, I think for the detention and enforcement, there are 10 that are scheduled to go in June, and then the other 12 would be scheduled in January.
Right, that's correct. So we've reduced their budget target down from about 2.9 million to about 1.568. It still involves the closure of the Northwest substation. Certainly there are going to be some increased response times and decreased patrol presence, but I know the police chief has some ideas about how she might change some of the schedules that would get adequate coverage during the periods of times when our parks are used the most, so we'll look at some changes to that. There will be some limitations on our ability to support special events, longer investigation times for internal investigations and the like. With respect to the jail operations, we will maintain the jail, the 200-bed jail. It will mean that we will continue the 1,050 bed capacity. We won't have to deal with 24-hour lockdown issues and the like, but we still will have these impacts. We're still going to see some increase in processing times due to the elimination of the law enforcement technician. We may have some longer wait times for attorney visits. There will be reductions in non-inmate programs. We'll eliminate the labor program for other departments for the inmate labor program. We're going to be eliminating the courtesy transports for Muni Court. We'll have to do that, I guess, by video. And there may be some reduction in visitation for family inmate visitation and reduced response times for bail release requests. So there still are going to be some impacts. With respect to neighborhood services, there's an additional staff reduction of 3 FTEs. You can see the budget impact there is a little more than $500,000. This is going to result in temporary delays in citizen complaints. Work crews will be reduced. We're eliminating 1 rapid response team. We're going to be focusing on critical needs through neighborhood indicators. That'll probably be more of the harder hit older ward areas. Remaining crews will be deployed to address emergency abatements and illegal sign and shopping cart removal, so there's going to be some impact on our ability to respond. With leisure services, we're looking at reducing an additional 3 FTEs for savings about $642,000. We're going to eliminate computer support for community centers, the computer labs, elimination of leisure on the go, which is a service we provided for some of the low-income seniors, and reduction of services supplies. With respect to the Office of Cultural Affairs, there's 4 full-time equivalent reductions and 1 part-time. The impacts of this will be, the community impacts will be fewer cultural events, perhaps less production value internally, and less ability to provide production staff on to rental clients. So I think this will take one of our stages out of business, or mobile stages out of business. With respect to the City Council office, we are looking at a reduction of about $268,000. That's going to impact 1 full-time equivalent. There'll be some other reduction in administrative support that will have to be scheduled, and we'll have to figure out how we're going to rotate schedules and things of that nature. And there obviously will be some reduction in our discretionary funding for the city manager, for the council offices. In the Office of City Manager, we have 2 FTE reduction. It's a $437,000 reduction. The impacts that are organizational, they're not going to be community impacts, but we're going to see reduced ability to respond to internal newsletters and communications, diversity banners, things of that nature, by the elimination of graphic artists. And there will be reduced ability to provide other production services to in-house departments, particularly after hours and on weekends. In finance, we're eliminating 7 positions, almost $750,000. These are all internal delays primarily, except that from the community perspective, our response times to dealing with business license complaints and our ability to continue to process licenses quickly is going to be diminished. We're not going to have as much staff to process those. And with human resources, there's an additional staff reduction of 2. That's $417,000. Organizational impacts are internal to us, but there's going to be an issue with staff to support labor negotiations, and if we ever get around to hiring additional folks, we're going to have a lean staff to do recruitment and selection. With information technologies, is a 9 full-time equivalent reduction, over $1 million budgetary reduction, and there's going to be the organizational impacts will be delays in courier service. Print shop requests may be a little slower. We're going to try to centralize that and perhaps outsource some of that. But just generally, there's going to be some internal slowdown in response times. With the Office of the City Clerk, we have 3 full-time equivalent reduction, about $250,000. And you can see the organizational impacts are internal. One of the things that we've been pushing pretty diligently is our enterprise records management system, which we think in the long term puts us in better stead to respond to public records requests, but also is a huge impact for departments in how we store, retrieve, and manage records. That project is going to continue to move on, but it's going to move on at a much slower pace. Planning and development, we're reducing an additional 2 positions, $182,000. Organizational impacts will be maps and addresses may be impacted. The community impacts, again, will be longer processing times and the ability to complete projects in a timely manner, and that would presume as things ramp back up. So we'll be lagging behind. In Public Works, an additional 5 FTEs, $575,000. The community impacts there will be some minor delays in repair for street lights, but there will be delays in new signal construction and completing some of the capital projects. We're just going to have less staff to manage some of those, so it may take a little longer. Field operations is an additional 7 full-time equivalent reduction, $425,000 is the impact. Several internal organizational impacts, primarily janitorial services here at City Hall, potential losses to utilize school district sites for the Open Doors, Open Schools, or the Safe Key programs may also be delayed. Some of the community impacts are going to be increased response times to damaged sidewalks, potential loss, again, on the community of the Clark County School District sites that we operate. With municipal court, there's an additional 2 positions we're reducing and 3 others through attrition, $625,000 reduction. You can see the organizational impacts. The community impacts, of course, are going to be longer response times, longer lines, and perhaps elimination of the in-house petty larceny and impulse control classes, the alternative sentencing program.
Mayor Goodman,
Yes.
if you don't mind, just real quick, because, Mark, if you just go back just 2 slides real quick, I'm seeing the numbers of the full-time equivalent and the total impact. The numbers are growing smaller. Can you go back to that slide? Can we take
This
it back
slide
into
here?
the overhead?
Which slide? The Public Works slide, or?
Right here, the public works slide has 5 full-time employees at 575,000. Go to your next slide. And then you have 7 full-time employees here at field ops for 425.
Because there's a delayed impact.
I'm sorry?
There's a delayed impact. They're not all happening right away. So some of these reductions are going to be delayed. As we talked, for example, about with the marshals, implementing a reduction in the marshal service in January of 2011 is only going to have a half a year savings.
Okay.
And some of the savings, though it's hard to see here, we talked about this in briefing as well, not all the savings are dollar savings. Some of the ones that look much larger per person savings, there is other non-labor items in there. For example, just to give you an example, one of the things that we're doing in finance is by changing shifts without eliminating positions, but changing how we assign shifts for our licensed officers work in the field, we can eliminate $44,000 worth of vehicles by sharing them on split shifts. So not all the savings are people savings.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Good question. City attorney, city auditor. City attorney is eliminating 3 positions. There's partial reductions in the victim witness program. That's what's happening there. And the city auditor's elimination of 1 position. Both of those other impacts on the city auditor obviously to be determined. Betsy?
Just a kind of quick roll-up of what that 16.8 includes. Obviously, there are still significant reductions in detention and enforcement, significant reductions in fire services, fire and rescue services. We have further reductions in leisure programming that will now affect seniors and children a little bit more. We have reduction in the field maintenance for Clark County School District sites, although that's a delayed implementation. We will have significant challenges in meeting the city clerk's objectives. Our cultural unit, technical unit support will go down. The number of rapid response units will be reduced. And we're hoping for additional fines and fees coming in from municipal court to help us sustain the Victims Witness Program for a year until hopefully we can make it completely grant funded.
Thanks, Betsy. The final year budget, this just gives you an idea of what the numbers look like for fiscal year 11 with this additional $16.8 million. And the thing that strikes you here is dropping from 557 to 530 to 477. That's what we're facing, and we expect to see another substantial drop in fiscal year 12 as well. The general fund recap, as you can see with the revenues and expenditures, we're looking at a $29 million deficit. How we expect to cover that $29 million deficit is there's $8 million we're transferring in from reserves, and then we're drawing down the fund balance. The beginning fund balance starts at $66 million. It will end at $45 million, which is 10% of our revenues. And that $21 million drop, coupled with the reserve transfer into 8, is how we cover the $29 million deficit. So hopefully those numbers make sense to you. We do have a capital improvement program. It is just a continuation of the projects that we already have in play at the moment. And as you recall, Mr. Aguero talked about how important it was not only for us not to lay people off, but to continue to maintain our capital program, and that's what this does. With respect to the redevelopment agency budget, this is what we're looking at for 2011. The net increment after this affordable housing set-aside is about $17.7 million. The debt service that we're looking at is 16.1. Operations, which includes a little bit for visual improvement program, is 6.1. You can see we have a deficit going in the redevelopment agency as well as 4.5. They will be drawing down their fund balance as well. Projects that the redevelopment agency is funding, capital projects, their fund balance for those projects has already been transferred to the capital project fund for those projects that they're, that they're responsible for funding. With respect to the budget transmittal, the tentative budget was filed in compliance with the state law. We will be filing the final budget on June 1st. Our Citizens Priority Advisory Council met on May 6th. Hopefully your members got back with you and briefed you on some of the discussions that we had. And in that Citizens Priority Council, as I mentioned earlier, we did review the budget policy, and they did recommend those, and you have already approved those. I'll turn it back to Betsy.
Just to start to wrap things up, where do we go from here? Well, obviously by making these additional adjustments since March 10th, it allows us really time for a more thoughtful approach towards what will be another very deep reduction going into fiscal year 12. It leaves us approximately $47 million that we will have to adjust for in fiscal year 12. We've talked about this privately, but we really do feel like we're at a point where we really have to restructure what we do and how we do it. And it's what we call a new sustainable city. It's going to require a big change. I mentioned to you last year we needed to have massive changes in the way we do business. We've begun making those. We're going to need to do more. And it's going to require quite a bit of thought and consideration going into that, particularly your vision about what the city of the future is going to look like and what you want it to be for this community. We want to start that process early, and we need to put this budget to bed, so to speak, and be done with it. Maybe take a breath, and then really start this summer working hard to lay the groundwork for the fiscal year 12 budget. No rest for the weary. So how do we plan to do that? As you know, we have been very focused on transparency. So much so that I think the mayor was about to choke me by the 13th town hall meeting. But I think it was worthwhile, and I think we've got a strong commitment among the city council and your management team to keep this process open and transparent to our employees, to our community, every one of you, and making sure that we're communicating the outcomes to the public effectively. Over the coming months, we will be verifying and validating a comprehensive list of reductions, somewhere between $45 and $60 million. We will build our new organizational model based on your service delivery priorities. And we'll be using that list to help you make those decisions. And that concludes our presentation today, Mayor. We will be happy to answer any questions you might have and be happy to take any direction.
Very good. At this time, I'm going to go in order of seniority as far as questions or comments, and then we'll have public input if anybody so desires. So I'll call upon the Mayor Pro Tem to start it off.
Thank you, Your Honor. Again, you started this meeting out in a very good fashion. This is a bleak day for all of us. I never thought I'd see the day when we would be making these kind of reductions in our budget. It's always been a huge rose, and now it's like a little dandelion, I guess, if you want to compare it. Sometimes we react to the calls we get from our citizens that we represent. And I've had a lot of input from my seniors about some of the programs we have down at the community center, East Las Vegas, some of the other community centers we have in my ward as well. The one thing that I've always wanted to protect was our employees. I look at our department heads over here, and I really feel sorry for you guys. You've had to make some really, really tough decisions. I see the sheriff sitting out there, and I'm going to have a couple questions of him if I could in just a minute. Betsy, the one thing that bothers me is that we have these community centers and we have these parks, and public safety is important. I know that we have to cut across the board. We can't be leave one unit alone. And so we've been discussing about our marshals and the use in our city parks. So in the next 6 or 8 months, are we in any problems with having coverage in our parks if necessary?
We've had several discussions, Mayor Pro Tem, even as late as yesterday afternoon with the sheriff. Chief Coyne and I went and met with him to talk about safety considerations in the park. If we were to implement the model that Mark rolled out for you, 2 waves of layoffs in our marshal unit, which will effectively reduce our marshal unit by about 1/3. And the sheriff told me 2 things, and he's here and he can speak for himself. 1, that he's willing to cooperate and help. 2, that we can take to the bank that there'll be no diminished safety in our parks. That he's willing to work with us as we go through this transition to help supplement our patrols in the park and the things that need to happen in those parks to keep them safe.
But we are going to depend upon the sheriff then to help us out in our parks.
Yes, and in a way, we already do. I
No,
mean,
I
you know
understand
that.
that.
I mean,
No, I
it's a
understand that.
partnership. This will just mean we'll have to strengthen that partnership.
But usually when we have an incident, we call our park marshals. And then if necessary, then they call the sheriff's units. And so I'm just saying, is he going to be, I don't want to be on the hot seat, Sheriff, but Bessie, are they going to come in there and patrol some of our parks some of the time, or just are they going to respond if we have a call to them?
Well, Mayor Pro Tem, part of the reason why we're recommending that we take 6 months before we do any additional reductions in force
Okay.
in the marshal unit is so that we can work out a schedule that will work. One of the things that we have talked about is trying to modify the shifts so that in peak park hours, we have our marshals available when the parks are open. The potential then would be for the Metropolitan Police Department to fill in like they do now when we're not on duty, to help cover that gap period. But that's also when our parks typically aren't open. So we have some work to do on that front. That's why we have a delayed implementation on this. I don't know if the sheriff wants to speak for himself, but he has agreed to be a partner in the resolution
I got
on
one more
this.
question. But see,
Sure.
I'm a little bit concerned because we implemented that no drinking in the parks except without a permit. And I think that in a lot of my parks, that's where a lot of the trouble begins, is we've allowed them in the past to come in there and drink to their heart's content until they're inebriated and can't even drive themselves out of the park. And that's when we start the problem starts. So I'm really concerned about how far we cut. Are we going to endanger anybody using the park? We got people that go in and use the walking paths, senior citizens early in the morning or even in the evenings and stuff. I just want to make sure that we feel safe there. Sheriff, we could. I don't want to put you on the.
You're not putting me on the spot, Councilman. For the record, Doug Gillespie, Clark County Sheriff. The city manager and I have had numerous discussions over the last few days in regards to the situation you're faced with. And basically what I've told her is what I'll tell you this afternoon. I'll commit to you the same level of policing that we've committed to the school district when they needed our participation in helping with the schools, and their staffing levels weren't able to accomplish it. And we continue to do that.
Mhm.
What we've done with Clark County Park Police. You may be familiar with the understanding agreement, MOU, that we currently have with them. We actually, myself and Chief Coyne had met a while back in regards to us helping out in regards to response to calls for service at or around city buildings during graveyard hours. We're committed to that. We'll stay committed to that. As you move forward in the difficult decisions that you make, that will truly determine what this partnership looks like from an operational standpoint. And I'm committed to working with the city manager as well as Chief Coyne to providing a level of safety to our parks, and I mean our parks, that our citizens have become accustomed to. But I think we also have to be realists that if we continue and further cuts need to be made and we further have to reduce either marshal positions or a variety of others, what does that look like from an operational standpoint? I can't tell you that
Yeah.
today. But what I can tell you is you're not going to be standing alone. Okay, I understand my responsibility as sheriff of this county, and nobody predicted the situation that we're in today, and therefore we have to work together to find solutions. So what will happen from this point forward is a number of my members of my staff will be meeting with Chief Coyne's staff, and we will develop what we see as an operational plan for if, in fact, there are these reductions in the latter part of your fiscal year. And then when we are comfortable with what that is and what that looks like, then I'd be more than happy to come back and present those to you at that time.
Thank you very much, Sheriff. That's good. Chief, do you agree with all that?
Your Honor, council members, Karen Coyne, Chief of the Department of Detention Enforcement. We have a fabulous partnership with the Metropolitan Police Department and every other law enforcement agency in this state, quite honestly. There will be impacts when we make these types of cuts, and I know that the sheriff will be responsible for handling it and that his team's going to do a fantastic job. That doesn't negate the fact that the level of reductions that we're talking about here are going to have impacts. We have a 27-year, long-standing, well-established patrol presence in all of our city parks and facilities, and you can be very proud of that. We've set some performance measures that tell me that we're doing a good job, other than me just telling you that we're doing a good job. We have 10-minute response times at all of our city parks and facilities. We measure crimes against people and property, and our goal is to have less than 1 against a person and 2 against property on a quarterly basis at the more than 120 properties that our citizens are invited to recreate at. And there are a host of other properties that go beyond that list into the 200s that we're out there, and that's what we specialize in, is our parks and city facilities, 20 hours every single day per week. So while I know that our partners at the Metropolitan Police Department will do a fine job with the priorities as they come about, I believe that we can't expect to make this level of cuts should they come to fruition and not experience impacts.
Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you.
Again, I want to thank staff, Betsy and Mark, for their presentations over the last 6 or 7 months as far as this crisis that we're in. And I really appreciate that. I'm not going to say too much about the fire department today because we are in negotiations and I don't want to step over the line. But, Chief, you got my support in doing what you need to do. I guess the biggest thing is that I would like to just say one more time what the mayor said is I would just like to ask all the city employees to please try to work with us. This is a crisis, and I've mentioned before, I hate to see anybody get laid off. And it's not a good thing, and we are responsible for the economy of the city of Las Vegas. And, we just have to continue to fight the battle. And I just ask that all of you work with us rather than against us. Thank you very much, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Councilman Wilson.
Mayor Goodman, you're probably going to hear this a lot in the next few minutes. You're going to hear a lot of thanks and kudos, but I think it's deserving. Betsy, your team, Mark, Scott, Orlando, Jim, an extraordinary effort in extraordinary times. Mark, I think you said earlier in the briefing that you hope at least never again in your lifetime that we have to go through this process again. So thank you for your unbelievable efforts. But the fact of the matter is that it's necessary. We don't have a choice. In my opinion, others outside of this state caused these hard times. I think we've managed well since I've been on the council. Both the people that have preceded me and the people that have come after me, I think we've done a good job at managing our money. But through others' actions, through others' faults, here we are today. And we have no choice. We have to make the difficult decisions, and those decisions, in my opinion, started a year ago. And to your credit, Betsy and your team, we didn't start this process weeks or months ago. We started looking inwardly 12, 18 months ago, and we started taking steps a long time ago. Not to be too repetitive, but through our town halls and our surveys and our community outreach, we tried to listen to what our constituents had to say, and I think it's reflective in this budget. One of the things our constituents told us was that the number one concern they have is public safety. There's been a lot of talk about our firefighters and our first responders and our police officers and just the government employees in general making too much money. But at the same time, our constituents said that public safety is number one. And I think when we look at, I don't know what slide it is, slide 7 on page 4, whatever slide it is, that when you look to the total percentage of reduction by function, public safety is less than 9%, but all of the other functions are either high 20s or 33%. So we listened to our constituents when we formulated this budget to make sure that we still provide the excellent public safety services that this community has come to expect, and that I, as a public servant, desire to continue to provide. But as we've said before, I started talking about a new employee a long time ago because I firmly believe that one of the most important things we should be doing now is to do what is necessary to limit the growth. Jeremy Aguero, our local expert and guru, said that probably the most important thing we can do is to control growth, which means limit the growth of salaries and benefits. I mean, that's the simple reality of the situation. We can cut as much as we can. We can determine what services are less important than others. But when 70% or so of our budget is personnel, we can't not look to that category. So in the last few months, we've had discussions with our labor organizations. And I'm not going to criticize anybody today. Dean, I see you out there, Chris, Tracy, and I didn't see Don King. Is Don King out here today? Or anybody from his association? Okay, you're not Don, but you're Don's right-hand man. These are the toughest of times, and I appreciate all the things we're doing. But in an effort to make the tough decisions and move in the right direction, we need to continue to talk about the new employee. And I understand that in some of the negotiations and some of the concessions that have been offered, there have been terms that provide for the so-called new employee, a lowering of a base salary, if you will. And I know that one of our organizations went pretty far in that regard. But when you look at the overall package, it wasn't enough, and that's why we don't have agreements yet. But I'm very, very pleased that there's significant, serious discussion about doing what we need to do in the future, about forming our new city, determining what services we want to provide, but at the same time, we have to create this new employee because we can't continue to pay the same salary and benefits that we had and have been doing for so many years. I'm confident we're moving in the right direction. It's slow, but we're making headway in these directions. Betsy, you said that we have to make massive changes to the way we do business. That was the phrase you used. Massive changes to the way we do business. And I think that the City of Las Vegas, more than any other local government entity, is doing just that. We are taking steps today to prepare ourselves for tomorrow by looking at the core services that we're providing and what business should the city be in the future. So this budget is necessary. We have to balance a budget. We have to submit a balanced budget, and that's what we've done. But as you've said, the work for tomorrow starts tomorrow, fiscal year 12. The planning for next year, it's funny, we say next year. Fiscal 11 doesn't start for a couple of months, and we're already starting to talk about fiscal 12. But I think that's what the responsible thing is to do. We have to start planning because the problem's not going away. Betsy, we have a projected $47 million shortfall for fiscal 12. That's after everything we're doing today. If this council passes this budget, then we already have a $47 million deficit for next fiscal year. So what we're doing today isn't enough. Am I right?
Correct.
Okay? So we have to be looking to the future, and we have to be making decisions. We have to be looking at what we're calling the new city. And I imagine the new city, much of it will be the same, because there are certain core services, there are certain things that our public wants and deserves. But at the same time, we have to look inward and decide, because we have no choice, what business are we going to be in? So I'm proud of this council. I'm proud of the decisions we have made up till today, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you about the continuing difficult decisions for tomorrow.
Thank you. Councilwoman Tarkanian.
Betsy, again, I want to thank you and Mark for all your hard work. I know whatever hour of the day or night we were able to contact you, no matter how big or small our questions were, you were there to help us. I want to thank your staff. I want to thank all the directors here who have had to make some really rough decisions. As I have had to see some of this considered, I must tell you that it has affected me more emotionally than any other job I've held in public office. It's a terrible thing when you see people who've worked so many years. We're talking about people working 20, 24, 26 years for the city, who have done absolutely excellent work, who wonder why I, what did I do wrong? And it's not that they did anything wrong. It's a situation they're placed in. This is a very difficult time for all of us, as we've all expressed so far. I think it was important that we went out to the public and we tried to get their thoughts on this. And I think it's important to note that the public said public safety was the first consideration. They did not say no cuts would come at all to public safety. What they said was public safety is where we want you to cut less. Public safety is where we want you to be sure to protect as much as you can. In the dire financial situation we're in now, it has to be cut some. And if you look, as Councilman Wilson had stated, on the Fundamental Service Review, we have an 8.9% public safety reduction, and everything else is more than double that or triple that for the other organizations. And those are not necessarily areas that don't have work anymore. I mean, Leisure Services still has that work. Leisure Services, where as we have some people we have to lay off, they're wondering now who's going to take care and make sure the kids get their meals that come from families that can't afford the meals. And those services still are needed, but they've had to be cut. I had a question for you, Betsy, and that is, we've added some very beautiful trails to our city. And I know I have a particular area in my ward that has a great concern about safety, where there's that big cut-down wash. And who's going to be doing any safety on that? Will Metro be handling that? Were park marshals supposed to before the cut? And I'm talking about where we have areas that might be dangerous.
I think you're talking about the new trail along Summerlin Parkway.
That's what
Is that the right one? Or are you talking about the one? Okay.
Well, I'm talking about the one that we have like a river channel behind it.
Okay.
A deep cement river channel, often graffitiized.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, trails has been, as we've expanded into the trail development, the issue of patrol has been a part of the dialogue since we developed the trail plan. It's not as simple as a park, and it's not as simple as a roadway.
Right.
I mean, it's not like you're really moving full-size vehicles through there in a patrol vehicle. We still have an obligation to respond to those incidents on city property, and that would be one of them.
Would that be our
marshals would
marshals?
respond to those typically. That will be something that we will have to address with the sheriff as we develop that implementation plan going forward. So it's obviously another piece of the puzzle that we will have to focus in on, in addition to our facilities, our community schools, and our parks. Trails are part and parcel to that. And so we won't lose sight of that as we're moving forward. We'll make sure that we address it in that implementation plan.
So that means either through Metro or the marshals that will be addressed.
Well, that's something that we will have to work through, and as I indicated to you earlier, as we develop that transition plan, that is something that we will be in close communication with each of you in our briefings and possibly in presentations to the council about what those service level impacts will be or could be through this implementation plan, so that we know exactly what we're dealing with.
Okay, I just wanted to get that point in there for
Sure.
those groups. Secondly, I wanted to get back to the public safety, and we've talked about the fire department. We've talked about the cuts that had to be there, and we've talked about the 3 brownouts. Now, as I understand, we've been told that we are not going to cause a problem with safety and being able to do that if we can effectively rotate those brownouts. Is that concern? Am I right or not?
That's my understanding from the fire chief. If you
May I do this, Councilwoman? May I call the chief up to respond to your question?
Certainly.
All right, Chief Gammon? You heard the Councilwoman's question? Thank you.
Greg Gammon, Fire Chief. Months ago, when this started to unfold and the economy started going bad, I can remember when we were looking at maybe one engine or one truck company every couple of weeks, and that might be browned out. And the goal is always response times, as it still is. And then it became, okay, we might do 1 a week, and then maybe 2 a week. And as the economy has continued to get worse, we're now looking at 3 a day at a minimum, and possibly even more. It hasn't changed the fact that my duty to the city and to our firefighters and to you as the city council is to try to get an advanced life support unit to the scene of an emergency within 4 to 6 minutes. That will always be my goal. Right now, do I think that can we achieve that with 3 brownouts a day? I believe that we can, based on some strategic placement of where those units are browned out and how we rotate them. My goal, as I've said at the 13 town hall meetings and before you on numerous occasions, is that all 17 of our stations will have an advanced life support, meaning it has a paramedic on it, engine and rescue company. We're going to be altering our training so that those units aren't out of service, and the goal is to keep at least 2 of those engines in every station as often as we can. Now, no fire department can predict the calls that come in and when they're out of service on that call, and there are times when another call will come in very close where one station may be out of service on another call. There's no guarantee, and there's no fire chief in the country that can guarantee that there won't be an impact on those type calls. As the economy worsens, and if we continue to where we have to make more than 3, I wouldn't be able to stand before you and say that there won't be an impact on response times. I can tell you now that my best guess in the work of my staff and the way that we are approaching this is we're doing our very best so that there is no impact to response times to those first arriving engine and rescue to a medical call.
And we would not go past 3, which you consider we can still do in a safe manner, unless it comes back here to our board.
Correct. That's what.
Okay, I just want to make sure about that, because I know I'm just trying to make sure that the public understands that we're maintaining the safety there. With difficulty, you're going to have to do the planning, and I'm sure it's going to be difficult on all of us as we try and move in. I know even though we're a very minuscule part of the budget, it will be on our 10th floor, the same type of thing. But with you having so much involved with public safety, it would have come back to the board before we did anything more. Okay, I thank you very much for that. And
Thank you, Chief.
yes, thank you very much, Mr. Gammon. I want to say that I personally feel that not all, but most of the unions came to us with good faith intentions when they came to us saying what they could cut back and so forth and so on. However, I don't feel that perhaps they understand, or maybe it's hard to accept because we've had so many good years behind us, good monies coming in, how difficult the financial situation is. You go to Los Angeles where they're almost near bankruptcy. You go throughout the country and you find these problems. So I want to say I appreciate the good faith efforts on the part of the unions. I know you're trying to do the best, and I know you've got a lot of pressures on you as well as we have on us. But I also ask you, please, to don't think we're hiding money places. If they are hiding money places, which we all know comes up in conversations, I've really tried very hard to see if that existed. I know the other council people are. We've gone over this so many times. We're just trying very hard to bring out all we can. And as Councilman Wolfson said, it's massive changes. And I've said for some time it's a new world out there. People far more intelligent than I are saying it nationally. It's a new world. When we move from the type of war economy we had to the industrial economy to many other different things in the phases of our history's growth, it was a different type of world. When women came into the big employment system, it became a different type of world for everyone. And this is what it is for us. We're not the nation that has all the monies coming in. We're not the nation that has the largest bank account. We're not the nation to whom lots of monies are owed. Instead, we're the nation that owes monies to many other nations. All that has changed. We're in a very precarious situation. We have to gut it up. We have to be together. We have to be a team, and we have to try and do this together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Ross?
Thank you, Mayor. First, let me say this, Mayor, through to Councilman Wilson. Councilman Wilson, thank you for your comments. And I'll tell you why I'm thanking you for your comments, because today is the most challenged day I've had to sit in this chair in the past 6 years serving as a city councilman. These are very, very difficult decisions, and I've lost sleep over this because I'm so concerned about the men and women who currently serve this city. Chief, Chief Gammon, you mentioned the word duty. And I appreciate you doing that because it reminded me of our duty. And Chief Coyne, and I think it helps remind you, and if the sheriff was here, I'd tell him the same thing. You have a duty to protect the citizens in this city. And you take that very seriously, as well as I. My number one priority has always been public safety. And I needed to have that level of comfort to know that the people in this city are going to continue to receive the same level of service. Chief Coyne, this is not easy for me to handle, and Betsy, you know the issues with our marshals. Betsy and I have gone over this and over this and over this, and Mark, you and I have too. I'm still having a hard time accepting that. You know that. I think that as we go through this, we're going to find some other opportunities because I'm still not fully accepting this about our marshals. I need that level of comfort to know that families are going to be safe in our parks. And I think the sheriff's words, I understood them. I get that, Chief. I know you're going to do everything you can to make sure that occurs, and Betsy, I know you will as well. But on that, I want to talk specifically briefly about the positions going to the courts. Who's here from the courts? Jim, you here from the courts? I need a commitment, and in fact, I'm going to actually insist. We save as many bodies as we can from the marshals unit to transition over to those court marshals in regards to warrant recovery and fine recovery. And Chris Collins, you're in the audience today. You can just nod your head and give me a personal commitment that you're going to do everything you can to help make this happen. We'll try. I appreciate that. And Jim, you do the same for me? Because that's important. Trying to save some jobs here, trying to recover some funds and get money back to the city. And I'd like to see that. Betsy, I know you and I have had this conversation, so consider that my insistence, that we at least try to save as many bodies as we can. In regards to the jail, a thought came to my mind, Betsy, and Mayor and council members. We're going to spend more money on bad guys and let the good guys go. And I hate to say it that way, but that's kind of what I see in that picture. But I understand it, and you've gone over that with me. Betsy and Mark, I've asked you this before, but for the benefit of the public, can we amend this budget at any time for the state?
Yes. Obviously, anytime we're reducing the budget, if we're successful in our current discussions with the bargaining units that aren't open, or as well with the fire, we can amend our budget downward, and I would probably recommend that we would do that just to clarify what happened. Amending it upward is a little bit of an issue because we have to demonstrate we have the revenues to do that. But amending it downwards is very simple.
And that's what I asked. And if we see service levels, and Betsy, you made that clear in your presentation, that if we find out that something's not working, we will have to reevaluate where we are. And perhaps the collective bargaining units say, hey, we want to be part of the solution a little more than we have been. They've been very generous so far in working with you, and I appreciate that. My hat's off to those of you that have been doing that. Thank you. But tomorrow is a different day. We have a duty to follow through with this and get this done. We don't have to like it because none of us like it. None of us want to lay anybody off here in the city of Las Vegas. That's not the idea. But a thought comes to my mind, too. Betsy, you prepared in our packet a scenario from the city of San Francisco. Can you briefly share that story with the council in whole and the public?
Well, as you may or may not know, something similar happened in San Francisco as a dialogue that happened here in the city of Las Vegas a couple of months ago. Mayor Newsom basically worked out a plan to lay off a great number of their employees. And after going through the mechanics of evaluating that, the bargaining groups and the mayor's office were able to reach concessions that saved many, many jobs, did reduce the number of hours through furloughs, cut some costs of employment to help them stabilize their budget. I think it was very hard, based on what I read, on everybody involved, but at the end of the day, they were able to reconcile and work out a plan that worked for that city. We did share that with you all during briefings this week. Just as a reminder, some of this stuff can work out, even as ugly as it gets.
That's why I brought that up, Betsy, because that was significant for me to see that, especially in light of Los Angeles's financial woes at this time as well. We're all in this together. We have some difficult decisions to make. The new city, we are going to change the way the city does business on a fundamental level. It's going to be different. What businesses do we want to be in as a city? We're going to listen to our constituents. We're going to listen to the residents who live here to tell us that. But we can't continue to do business the way we've done it before. We can't continue to do the same things because we're getting the same results. And we need different, better results for tomorrow. Because 2012 is tomorrow's discussion. Figuratively. And that's significant, that we're all fully aware of. And I think all of the employees feel the same way. I've been looking at, and Mark, I know you have as our Chief Financial Officer, looking at nationwide economic indicators. Man, they look great. Looks like we're coming back. But not Las Vegas, not just yet. And we won't feel that till when? Say the economy does change, Mark. When do we feel that as a local government?
There's in our forecast, we're talking about returning to some level of inflation-like growth, and I'm talking about inflation-like growth, 3% maybe, plus or minus, and starting maybe in fiscal year 13.
Okay. 2013, we should see something. We should see something here at home. Is that that's your forecast?
That's what our Financial Oversight Committee also suggested, that probably fiscal year 13 we can assume to see some inflation-like growth, which is nothing at all like we experienced in the first part.
Well, like I said, as I look at those economic indicators, I'm not feeling the love. I'm not seeing that here at home. I'm not seeing that in the city of Las Vegas. And I'm looking forward to it. Department heads and directors, I've already told you in our previous budget meeting how I feel about all the things that you've done. We're changing people's lives, some not for the better. And you have friends and colleagues you've worked with for years that are going to be affected by this. And that hurts. And that's why I haven't felt good about sitting in this chair today until Councilman Wilson's comments. Councilman, thank you very much. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Barlow.
Thank you, Mayor. And first and foremost, I would like to thank you, Mayor, and all of my colleagues here on the council for being the true leaders that you all are, and for the executive staff, Betsy, your entire staff, the management team, and all of the directors, head of departments, managers, staff. It's a tough position that we're in, not only locally, but statewide, nationwide. And, it really, I hate to use this term, but it really sucks where we are right now, specifically for the staff of the City of Las Vegas, who has worked here for many, many, many years, putting in their intelligence into the City of Las Vegas system, for believing in the mission and the vision and the direction in which the many councils that you all have seen before we even got here. We have individuals that have, unfortunately, name has made the list to be cut, who have been working for the City of Las Vegas 28, 25, 20, 15, 10, 3 years, and some within the last year and a half coming onto the City of Las Vegas being cut. It's very disheartening for me, specifically because I came on as a staff person, and when times are really good, things are moving and shaking. I mean, it was whatever the council members wanted to go into their districts and be able to put out into the community. It was really nothing for it to happen. And now to sit on the council where it's very difficult to make anything move but reductions in force, that's why I use the term "it sucks." It really does. And the decisions that we have to make today, specifically when we're talking about lives, it touched me just more emotional than anything else, because I know that there's employees whose spouses and loved ones and family members who have already lost their jobs in the private sector or other governmental agencies, and now they're on the list to be cut. So, I can, only think about, them and what and how they feel, how you feel, in regards to what the next step is going to be in an economy where there's no jobs to be had. We, the mayor and council, took an oath of office to look out for the interests of this great city. And I always use the term that change comes voluntarily and involuntarily. And there's nothing that we can do about it. But we have to be, we as a council, we have to be the leaders that our constituency has put us in place to make these very tough and difficult decisions. We're talking about $50 million in cuts, 200-plus layoffs, community and organizational impacts. Needless to say, where we're going to be next year this time, talking about fiscal year 12, in the middle of fiscal year 11, in regards to the $47 million impact that we still have to make adjustments to. So that means we'll be back at this table once again, having the same tough decision. We talk about public safety. The community spoke loud and clear that public safety was very important. And to hear now that, the brownouts in the fire department and the additional cuts to the marshals means that the impacts in the communities now will be felt very heavily, specifically concerning for me, representing an inner city ward that has some very colorful spots throughout it. One of the biggest parks the city of Las Vegas has is Lorenzi Park, and and the activities that have been taking place in and around Doolittle. Those things concern me specifically as it relates to the reduction in our marshal service. I am pleased to hear that the sheriff is here and provided his commitment to stand with us to figure out how, in fact, we are going to move forward in this very difficult situation as far as protecting our parks and the way in which we have done service in the past, knowing that moving forward is going to be slightly different, if not drastically different, as far as how, in fact, these parks are protected from a public safety standpoint. I can only hope and pray that things get better sooner, because these are people we're talking about. These are not machines. These are people who have kids. These are people who have mortgages, rent, food, livelihood that they have to basically maintain in order to be productive citizens in our community. And the decisions that we make today, and I'm not sure what decision or how this vote is going to go down today, but I just implore this entire council to just do the right thing. We were put here to make this hard decision, and in closing, not to offend anyone, but I come from the position that God places special people in special places to do special things, and I believe that this is a very special council that has a very special project before it, and so we must do what it takes in order to make this city the greatest city in the world. And so for that, Betsy, thank you, and Mayor and Council, thank you all for your leadership, your true leadership.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Anthony.
Thank you, Mayor. Going last, what I can say is my colleagues up here have all made the right comments. They've asked all the right questions. All I can add from a personal standpoint is when I came onto the City Council a little less than a year ago, one of the first briefings I had was the budget. This is the budget. This is where we're at. This is the situation we're facing this fiscal year. And all I can tell the members in the audience and the public is this is the subject that we've been talking about the most for the last year. I mean, we talk about it up here. We talk about it at briefings. We talk about it at meetings. We went through a very slow, methodical, deliberative process to engage the community, to do surveys, to go out to town halls. Like Betsy said, there were 13 of them. The mayor attended every single one. The ward council members attended their wards. We put together packages. We did reviews. We did focus groups. I mean, it goes on and on and on, the amount of time that we put into where we've gotten today. We've talked to the collective bargaining units. Our directors have looked at their budgets, and this is where we're at today. We have a balanced budget. It does reflect what the public said. They wanted public safety reduced by the least amount, and that's reflective in this budget. And it does reflect the other portions of the budget, as the public has said, and as the directors have looked at. So it's that's where I just want people to understand that we didn't just do this yesterday. This has been a long, dramatic, really tough process for everybody. And this is my first budget with the City of Las Vegas, so I can't say what my colleagues up here have gone through because this is definitely an atypical budget. They've gone through some events that are a lot different than I have, so it's probably been a lot tougher for them than for me. But we're going to start again July 1st. We're going to start all over again. We're going to go through the exact same thing. We're going to spend all of next fiscal year talking about the FY12 budget. And it's, the discussions that we're going to have are things like, should we be in that particular business? Should we be doing that anymore in this particular environment? Can somebody else do it cheaper? Can somebody else do it better? We're going to have those discussions from this point forward, and it's almost like we were talking to somebody yesterday. It's almost like a zero-based budget, where every program you have to start at zero and decide whether to fund it in the first place and how much you're going to fund it after that. That's the discussions that we're going to be having. So I want to first of all commend Betsy because she's been at the groundwork of this the entire time, and Mark. You two have been really working on this the hardest and briefing us. So this is where we're at today. We have to have a balanced budget. We're ready to provide, I believe, those services that the public wants us to support, and we're just going to move forward starting July 1st. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who wish to be heard?
Yes.
Put the 3-minute timer on, please.
Just the mic?
Yep.
Yes, my name is Eddie Reedham. Some of you may remember me. I wanted to congratulate you guys for doing such a great job helping the frauds to make us #1 in mortgage foreclosures and in auto fraud as well. I informed you guys years ago. I even sent letters to the senators telling them that they need to hold hearings on the effects of fraud by auto dealers and finance companies and the effects it has on the public.
Sir,
This is why you're bankrupt, and you still don't want to listen.
No, I don't. I want to listen to you at some later time during your citizens' participation.
Oh, I
this
thought
has
you
to do
said
with
this
the
was
budget.
it.
No, this is not. This is on this issue.
Oh, I thought
No
you
problem.
called the citizens. God bless you. I'll wait.
Okay.
Mayor and Council, Tracy Valenzuela, President of the Las Vegas Peace Officers Association. A statement was made by the mayor that he wanted the city employees to step up. And I have to say, Mayor Goodman, I think they're willing to step up, but you set the bar very high. And I think, in my opinion, it's ridiculously high. I think all the unions have been willing to work with you in some capacity or some way, but it seems to be your way or the highway. We've talked about the city employees' actions, and I think their actions right now are about self-preservation, in that currently we're probably talking about 200 people, their homes, city employees' homes, being placed in jeopardy of foreclosure. With what you're asking for, the 8% rollback, plus step increase freezes, longevity freezes, COLAs, going without those, then you're talking about probably 600 homes being placed in foreclosure. The unions have come to you. Most of them have. You said some of the offers were generous, but you haven't accepted any. And if you have, I'd like to know which ones you've accepted.
We haven't accepted any.
Okay, and if you haven't, I think we talk about the open meeting negotiations and transparency. I think not only the public, but the city employees deserve to know why you haven't accepted those.
Because they haven't reached the level where we'd be able to keep all the people working and provide all the services, which was flat plus 8%.
And we may not be able to keep everyone working, but if you can accept some of the proposals or be willing to, I think, negotiate and save some jobs, that's better than none. So I think the city employees deserve an explanation, and I don't think that's reasonable. Instead, we've gotten rhetoric, posturing, and grandstanding. And what they've done, the city employees have turned their backs on you and dug their heels in the sand. I implore the council to extend an olive branch to the associations and do true negotiations and not just hold out on the 8%. And the employees have told you what they're willing to give, what they can afford to give. I think any drop in the bucket is something to help get the bucket filled. I think if you accept some of the offers, then other people will see you accepted those offers and be more willing to come to the table. So, Councilman Barlow, I stand with you in prayer that this will be able to be worked out.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Don Chalice. I live in Councilman Ross's district. Before you plan a new sustainable budget, I want you to consider this. The redevelopment agency was supposed to revitalize existing communities, but resources have largely gone to the rich rather than to communities that already exist. The city has a long history of environmental injustice, to include its complicity to put I-15 through West Las Vegas.
Well, I think, sir,
though it
I'm
would
going
cost more to
to ask you to
construct
come
than
back
other
to
options.
when we have citizens' participation.
These have to do with budget consideration.
I'll hear you when it's citizens' participation. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Val Sharp, CEA Vice President, standing here on behalf of Don King, who couldn't make it. One question that I did have that I was directed to ask is, are we going to get a response to the counter that we presented to the city after our discussions that we held for about 4 hours yesterday? I don't need that response right now, but we're looking for a response from the city.
Ms. Fretwell, do you want to respond to that at this time, even though a response is not requested?
We sent a response today around noon.
Thank you.
Okay, we didn't see that, and we had our meeting there at the office from noon to 1, so that's fine. Thank you very much. Councilman Wolfson, Councilwoman Tarkanian, Councilman Barlow, I appreciate the comments that you made. You know, there's a trite phrase, I feel your pain. And it's kind of a joke because of who made it. But we feel the pain of our people that are going out. And Councilman Ross, you talked about not sleeping. Yeah, I'm there with you. You know, it's not easy being in the position that I'm in, trying to deal with guys at 15 years and has no place to go, no bumping rights, and he's out the door and does a good job for the city. Councilman Stavros, thank you very much for your comments. The problem that we have, I'm not going to reiterate what Tracy said, but you know, we're not serfs in a fiefdom. We want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. We want to come as equals and team members to work with you on this. But negotiation, I mean, 2 defense attorneys up here are experts at negotiating because you've got clients and you know what their status is and you know if they go to trial something's going to happen, and if you can cut a better deal, that's part of your job. That's what you do. You advocate for your client's best interests. Well, that's what we're trying to do. But we want to do it on a, here's what we can do, or here's what we think our members will accept. What's the best you can do to come there? To meet us midway or 3/4 of the way or some way. Because it takes that kind of effort to accomplish what we all want to accomplish. I can see my time's up. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I make one quick comment, please, Mayor Goodman? Val, I'm sorry I didn't remember your first name.
That's not a problem. That's not important.
Just real quickly, my understanding of this process, Betsy, and you can confirm this, is that nothing stops today as far as continuing in discussions with our labor organizations. Isn't that right?
That's accurate.
Okay, and
we
so-
know that.
And I know you know that, and Chris is here, and I see Dean, and Tracy's probably still here. We're not saying no to anything, but we all have jobs to do, and I appreciate what you're saying about trying to work together. Let's just continue to keep trying.
Right. And all we ask is that our efforts are recognized, because we constantly hear that we're not trying to do anything, and we know we are and have been for several many months. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I did want to say, I did thank you for your efforts. And I think the rest of the council knows the efforts too. It's just maybe being to see the whole picture, that's all.
No, that's why I acknowledge you. I appreciate your
Thank you very much.
Hi, Chris Collins, President of the Las Vegas Police Protective Association. I represent the municipal court marshals and your deputy city marshals. I'd just like to hit on one thing that Tracy started with, and that is that we have made proposals. And if you had accepted the proposal that we offered just 10 days ago, it would have saved 50% of the cuts in the marshals program. Now, currently, you're talking about laying off 24 marshals in January, by January. That reduces the marshals' force by, 45.5%. If you don't believe that 45.5% reduction in your public safety will not have an adverse impact, then you're sitting up here fooling yourselves. The councilwoman brought up who is going to patrol the trails. The sheriff's not here, and I don't begin to speak for the sheriff, but I can assure you that the men and women of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department will do their very best to patrol your trails. But they do not have the time to get out and walk those trails, which the marshals currently do have. They do not have the time to get out and walk in your parks and stop the sexual assaults that have been stopped in your park restrooms by your marshals. That is not going to happen. Those sexual assaults will happen. Those victims will make a phone call to the police department, and we will respond. And we will investigate those crimes and do everything we can to bring those people who perpetrated those crimes to justice. But they will not be prevented. If you accept the offer that we currently have on the table, I can't guarantee you that every one of those crimes will be prevented, but I can guarantee you that a great number of them will be prevented. So if they happen as a result of your vote today, let that be on your shoulders, not the shoulders of the men and women who work for you as marshals or the members of the PPA. That will be on your shoulders.
Mayor Goodman, please. Chris, just real quickly, Mayor Goodman. You know, one of the things that this body was criticized for a year ago was a lack of equality between the groups. And Val, you're still out there. One of the things I think that the CEA criticized us for was they were the first ones to come to the table, but were treated unequally. And that's what we're trying to do here. And I don't want to get too specific in the bargaining process and all that stuff, but I want you to understand at least, now this is just my personal perspective, but you know, as Councilman Anthony said, we talk about this constantly. One group comes to us with a pretty good offer, but we want all of the groups to be treated equally. That's what we're trying to do here. So if you feel that we rejected something that may be on its face reasonable, we're trying to get everybody to come to us in an equal fashion.
I understand that, Mr. Wolfson, but the bottom line is, you know what? I represent the 60 marshals and the 17 Muni Court marshals. I don't represent the IAFF or Tracy's group or Don's group, and they have to do what's in the best interest of their groups and go home and sleep at night, just like I do. When I get up in the morning and come to work like you all do, I put my pants on one leg at a time, I put my shaving cream on, and if I can look in the mirror and say that I did the very best I could for the people I represent that day, then I'm happy. I don't say that I'll win every battle or that every one of my people will be treated exactly as the others are. But you know what? We work for that. But if we can't get there, then you have to do what's best for the majority of the people. And that's what we do every day. If we have an offer on the table, which we do, which when we left the table, a member of your staff said, "This is a good offer, Chris. I think it will be accepted." Literally in less than 24 hours, I was told it was not accepted. I don't think I got any real consideration from any of you at all, to tell you the truth. But like I said, I do the best I can. I'm sure you do too. Sometimes equality can't be reached. Why not preserve the jobs that you can? That's all I would ask.
Thank you.
If somebody asks a question, does my time start over? Dean Fletcher, President, Las Vegas Firefighters. I'm going to start out by saying voting on brownouts, if you vote on that today, is accepting losses. When seconds count, we might be minutes away instead of seconds. That's what's going to happen if you accept brownouts for the fire department. I put together a little packet, and yes, decisions were just made overnight, Councilman Anthony. The fire department budget was cut by $3 million from yesterday till today. When our budget could have been met with our offers that were not accepted by the council, there would have not been brownouts. Now, all of a sudden today, you cut $3 million out of our budget, so we can still have brownouts, even with our concessions that you know that are still on the table and we're willing to accept and are moving to ratification. We believe this is part of a long-term plan by you. It's been written about by the city manager. There's a plan by the city manager that's a city document that you guys aren't abiding by of you're not going to get everything at once. Let's try to get as much as we can. And we'll be covering that later, I'm sure, with the media. I have a very important question that I want on the record, is what is the budget deficit going to be for this current fiscal year that we're in for 2010?
Sorry, Your Honor, took me a while to get my
No
sheet.
problem.
We're projecting a budget deficit for fiscal year 10 of $25.5 million.
And then for fiscal year 11, we're saying still 20 million from our briefing on the 5th. Is it 20 million?
No, as I reported in the slide, it's $29.8 million.
Okay, so from May the 5th, when we met with the city manager's office till now, it's increased by 9 million. That's how rapidly things seem to change. But anyhow, I challenge you, and I'm going to keep track of it. I'm going to go public with it. As soon as our budget deficit for this year isn't $25 million, I hope that people are hired back and that reductions in public safety don't take place. There's a whole bunch of other things that you promised, a revenue stabilization fund, $50.5 million. It's earning interest right now. It has $53 million in it. You aren't using it. In the last budget meeting, you said you would use it to reduce cuts. That's not being reduced. And that money came from extra money in the general fund and from other capital project funds. There's additional items that we see that are going to lead to not having a deficit that is being projected for this fiscal year. We've done our part. It seems as soon as we do something, something else changes, and it's very obvious. Our department budget from a month and a half ago has been reduced by $14 million. $14 million from a tentative budget to a final budget. And public safety will be affected, and the public said we don't want it reduced, not to be reduced a little. They said not to be reduced, and you are reducing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to be heard at this time? All right, then we'll close the public hearing on both of those items. Is there a motion?
Mr. Mayor, could I ask a question?
Certainly.
Betsy, answer some of those questions that were brought forth so we could have it on the record. That Mr. Fletcher, Ideen, some of the questions he asked about why did we add millions of dollars since a week ago, I think it was. How long ago was it?
Last night.
Since last night. Did that happen? And if it did, why?
Mark, you may want to come talk about this. Obviously, Councilman, we have reduced the budget since March 10th.
And
Purposely, and at the direction of the mayor and council, to try and diminish our reliance on the reserves this year substantially. And we're still in the ballpark of what we've been saying we were anticipating to use draw down our reserves by going to about $30 million in the utilization of reserves for next year. We're still around where we thought we were going to be if we come in at 27 or 25 million in spending more than we actually brought in. That's within the budget that you approved last year, this time.
And I understand that, but I'm just trying to understand what changed in a few hours, less than 24 hours.
Well,
Or did it change, or maybe the
It changed in May. If I can go back to the PowerPoint, I shared this slide with you. And I mentioned to you, and I've mentioned to you in briefings, that as a result of the new forecast by the Fiscal Oversight Committee that we convened in early May, that we're now facing for fiscal year 10 as well as fiscal year 11 a combined $21 million in less revenue than we knew about when we put the tentative budget together.
So you're saying that it was a...
This is the driver.
Yeah, that's the driver. In other words, we had what we thought was going to be less monies, and it turns out that we found out sometime in early May that it was going to be more of a deficit. of income coming in.
Not to be glib about it, but there are times when I thought convening the Financial Oversight Committee every 6 months is a bad idea. When the revenues are free-falling, every 6 months, I get a new number. And that's just the state of the economy. If I only convened them once a year, I'd only have to deal with this once a year, except it would be a much larger gap. And so, I mean, I appreciate what Mr. Fletcher said, and I mean, as the one who stands in front of you trying to put this budget together, he doesn't know how much pain I feel to stand in front of you to tell you that, hey, we're off another $21 million, but that's the fact.
And you found that out as a result of the 6-month information given to you?
That's right, and as a result of this, and as we were doing briefings, that's when we got direction from you that we probably need to make another swipe at this additional $21 million in shortfall, so that we have a running start at it for fiscal year 12.
So we
and
could
that's
help
where we're
with
at.
the next fiscal year. Okay. Yeah.
And
thank you. I wondered that. 3 brownouts now, nothing said further, and that's where we are.
And we'll bring it back to you if we have
That's
to go
a
any
school
further.
teacher in me, by the way. I have to, well, because if you hear it 15 times, you're supposed to retain it forever.
All right, any other comments before we consider a motion? Okay, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, Your Honor. On item number 6, I would ask the mayor and council I would like to move to adopt the budget as proposed and presented here this day by our city manager and her staff.
Let's vote on that. Opposed? Motion carries.
And item 7, Your Honor, make the same motion, please.
All right, please vote. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We're up to item number 8, citizens' participation. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters within the jurisdiction of the City Council and Redevelopment Agency. No subject may be acted upon by the City Council and Redevelopment Agency unless that subject is on the agenda and is scheduled for action. If you wish to be heard, please give us your name, and we'll put the 3-minute timer on. Yes, sir.
Eddie Reedham. Wrong mic?
You're fine.
Eddie Reedham. Yes. In regards to the budget and the police officers and all the different agencies that want to keep more pay, I have some advice, and it's pretty solid. Get real, deal with the reality. There's a depression going on. The entire world was affected by it. It killed our economy. $4 to $5 trillion were spent just to keep us to the level where we are, and many banks still closed, and there's a financial crisis that is the most severe since the Great Depression. This may even be greater than the Depression, because if they would have spent $200 or $300 billion back then, it would have kept the banks open. But we've spent $4 to $5 trillion, and we're still having very, very great problems. So my advice is to tell your attorneys to comply with the city, because this problem is not going away. If you don't want to do that, some of you are going to lose your jobs. If you want to help your friends, make the sacrifice, and everybody can keep their job. This is real. Now, when I went to the police when I was being defrauded, you guys told me, get an attorney. No one should have to get an attorney when somebody's doing felony frauds, racketeering, and all kinds of crimes like that. The police should enforce those laws. When slavery was going on, that was a part of the Constitution where people had a right to personal property, and that was their property. Nobody could take it. That was a part of their pursuing liberty and all those other things it talks about. So when Tobin sold my $27,000, the mayor and the governor had no business whining and dining with him at the Southern Highlands Golf Club. And after they robbed me, my mom died in the process. I've been going through homelessness constantly. Channel 13, who unplugged their deal, they dropped my case and my file. But like the prophet that I am, when I open my mouth, I speak the truth. And it doesn't go away. Because what I was saying was real. And the problems of that fraud have manifest to circle the globe. And the mayor told me last time, or when I told him, I said, I don't want to have to sue the city. He said, oh, go on. And I probably will be doing that, probably for like about $1 billion. And I'm not being totally insane. I have about 15 to 16 patents, some on airbag technology, safe for newborn babies, pre-inflated technology, all kinds of stuff. But my business and my life have been hindered greatly when you wouldn't enforce the laws that you swore to uphold and the Constitution of Nevada and the United States. I'm sure all of you guys made that promise and oath when you took office. But yet you let me be robbed, defrauded, and I warned you and begged you and pleaded you that after it was an obvious problem, you started arresting your own officers. Officer Goody, I think it was a she was a female, she was arrested for mortgage fraud. But when I came to you with serious fraud cases and begged the Senate to take some action and look at the damaging effects on this, oh, nobody did anything. The police called the police on me. It's on YouTube. I have over 500,000 views, and I'm going to make an official presentation to the city, and I'm going to give you a chance to negotiate. If you don't, I'll win this case, because you guys have been shameful, and you are the reason that the crisis happened. That's why we're number one. Enforce the laws, the fraud won't continue like it did. God bless you. I love you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Well, I'm sorry my voice was loud. It's not anger. I'm just an emotional person. God bless, guys. Good luck.
My name is Don Chalice. I received my PhD from UNLV. I believe it was a year before Mr. Anthony in sociology. I also teach at the College of Southern Nevada. My comment is that the city is planning for a mob museum and a new city hall at the expense of public workers' jobs and future projects for West Las Vegas. I don't know how long I can speak before you'll cut me off. So I wanted to make that statement first. I want you to be thoughtful and just in your budget, both the 2011 the general budget and also the redevelopment budget. Before I was interrupted, I did mention some of the history of Las Vegas, which is important for people to know. They need to know that in 1956, the city of Las Vegas conspired with the highway department to put I-15 through the historic west side, even though it would cost more than the two other alternatives. It's important to know that in 1968, the city closed several streets in West Las Vegas, which took years of protest to reopen. The city has spent money on projects that haven't worked, like Neonopolis. Between 2003 and 2006, the city conspired to close F Street, cutting off the only direct access from West Las Vegas to billions in development at Symphony Park. So again, I ask you to be thoughtful and just in these budget decisions. You can find additional information on the documents that I used for this statement at streetsociologist.blogspot.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to be heard at this time?
Hello, Council. Brent Busey, off-duty City Marshal. With your vote a few minutes ago, that sealed my fate as one of the bottom 12. I have been serving this community. This is unprepared, so forgive me. Been serving this community in a law enforcement capacity for about 17 years. About 5.5 of that with the city total. That seal, the city of Las Vegas, me, my wife, other officers that I work with that are going to lose their jobs, we are that seal. We are what you all talk about in the budget that you formed. I have a wife, 2 little girls. As a law enforcement professional, somebody who was born and raised here, went to high school, college, my wife the same. That was it. Went to Sam's Club the other day and, ran the debit card and it said accepted. And you know what crossed my mind? That if this vote went through today, by June 12th, in that first cut, it's going to say declined. And then I have to figure that out. Don't get me wrong. I understand the budget. I'm a news savvy guy. I've had discussions personally in your guys' offices on our foot patrols. Some of you know me. But I just got to tell you, I'm the face of the city. We are what makes up why you're here. Like I said, born and raised, went to school here, college, the wife, girl, our kids go to First Good Shepherd right around the corner. I know that in that 4,000, that packet of 4,000 petitions, you got a letter from the principal. I got that letter. They don't want to see cuts in public safety. That's part of the redevelopment. We utilize the city facilities forgive my emotions, but you're talking about my career, and I know what's done is done, and I understand it. I really do, but I do know that there's room to work, and I hope that something happens in the witching hour or the last minute or whatever you want to call it. I really do. If I could sign a personal employee contract, I'd give you a $20,000 pay cut right now. Me personally, can't speak for everybody else, but I can tell you that because we're fiscally smart parents and people. Our mortgage and our kids' education are our two biggest expenses. If that's a bad thing, wow, So that's all I got. I just wanted to share that with you guys. All right. So I hope something is meshed out. This is coming from my heart. That's all I got left at this point. So thank you.
1 second, please.
Yes, sir.
You are the face of the city, and we could save that face because our door isn't closed. Okay? There's a lot of oratory going on, a lot of posturing going on, but the bottom line is this. We set a bar. I want everybody to get as close to that bar. If they can't reach the bar, that it's humanly possible. And then we save your job. It's that simple. The meeting's adjourned.
Wait, oh, Don.
Nope.